Thank you, Lascan Corla. First of all, I want to thank the Rural Independent Group for bringing forward this most comprehensive motion, which captures, first of all, the impact of rapidly rising inflation and the high cost of living, which affects every Irish citizen, but of course disproportionately affects those on lower incomes, middle incomes and, above all, fixed incomes. But secondly, this motion captures many of the specific cost increases for those who work and live in rural areas, on top of the increases already felt by all Irish people. Now, I think it's really important to make the point that those who live and work in rural areas have specific challenges when it comes to rising costs. I understand housing costs and childcare costs are less in rural areas than they are in urban areas. But I believe that we need to recognise the specific costs, extra costs in rural areas to ensure balance and meaningful debate. So first of all, I'd like to look at some of the issues that are specific to those who live and work in rural areas. And I'll start with those engaged in agriculture. This motion speaks of the 3 Fs: fuel, fertiliser and feed. And those 3 Fs capture very clearly the specific extra costs incurred by our primary producers, our farmers. Over the last 12 months, there has been a feed price hike of between 15 and 20 euro per tonne, and that was just to the end of last year. This is a massive cost for many farmers, and yet they are expected to absorb this cost. And we also know that feed costs could increase further because, unfortunately, the soya forecasts in certain South American countries have decreased due to drought. So this is an escalating problem, and one that farmers must contend with on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. But that's not the only increase that farmers are facing. In 2021, the price of petrol rose by 27% and diesel by 26%, and this has escalated further this year. Every single week we see an increase at the pumps. We are the 17th most expensive country for fuel in the world. And farmers need to use fuel specifically to carry out their farming activities, whether it's a fill of diesel for their tractor or the electricity used in the various farming activities. Also, Minister, we have a massive rise in fertiliser costs, and it's crippling farmers. And there is no sign that those prices will come back or ease in the short term. Fertiliser prices increased by almost 90% in the year to 2021. I mean, this is totally unsustainable. And what makes it even more unsustainable is that the price of food has no connection to the cost of producing food. Any link between the production of food and the price of food is totally broken. And those who take the hit are the primary producers, the farmers. We urgently need a regulator to ensure a fair distribution of profits throughout the supply chain. I and many others have called for this for so many years because the current situation once again highlights the absolute need for fairness in the food supply chain. So, Minister, farmers are squeezed at both ends. The rising costs of virtually all inputs, but at the same time, our own CSO figures show that food prices in December 2021 in Ireland were 90% of what they were in December 2010. This situation is untenable, and while, yes, I welcome the 7 million package for the pig industry, and it will make a real difference, nonetheless, farmers are business people and they want an opportunity to make a living, to earn a living, and not to be relying on once-off government payments. Yes, this 7 million will help keep many pig farmers afloat. I'm not diminishing its importance, but I am saying that in the overall context, the year-to-year rather than the day-to-day or the week-to-week, in that ongoing context, farmers, primary producers must be in a position to earn their living, to make some money from what they do, rather than having to call on government for a special fund or a unique response to a particular set of circumstances. You and I know, Minister, that farmers are price takers. They have no real power and they rely on state intervention. And in this case, I believe a regulator is needed with powers of enforcement. But furthermore, those who live in rural areas have limited, or in some cases, no access whatsoever to rural transport. So the increase in costs at the local pumps has a disproportionate impact. I support the call in this motion for government to reduce the excise duty on fuel. This will impact on those in rural areas and in urban areas. And while a 20% decrease in Lewis tickets is most welcome, I'd say very few people in my constituency will see any benefit for this. But, Minister, a reduction in excise on fuel would have a real impact, because energy poverty stalks both rural and urban Ireland. The motion also asks you to reduce the VAT wedge on fuels and energy for 6 months. Unfortunately, because of the situation in Ukraine, I honestly believe that you will have to do something like this, because the impact of the actions by the Russians so far will simply be to increase fuel prices. And this state cannot continue to take a greater and greater percentage of the increased costs to its citizens, because it's crucifying people. Now, I don't hold the same view as the rural group on carbon tax. To me, this is a ring-fenced, fixed tax which will go to those who need it most when it comes to retrofitting their homes, because retrofitting is a medium and long-term solution, and it's never easy for government to fund good outcomes in 4, 5 or 10 years. So I do think that's a positive step. But you have a responsibility to deal with the immediate problems also. The cost of living increases are really hurting middle, lower income earners and those on fixed incomes, because they spend so much more of their income on food and fuel. Minister, I commend this motion.